All right, so we're going to talk about cladograms today, what cladograms are and how to use them. So you should be able to figure out by the end of this what does a cladogram show and how to use it. So you can see right here I've got circled mosses. So mosses, ferns, conifers, and flowering plants. These are the four items that are on here, and these may seem like they're pretty similar, but there are some differences between these four types of organisms. And so this cladogram actually shows that, but if you don't know how to read it, then that information is difficult to get. So I want to kind of explain this briefly and then talk about how they're related with each other. So everything from this point on, which is all four plants, all four organisms that are on here, from this point on has a life cycle that involves spores and gametes. And even if you don't know what that is, you know that that's true because of what, or you know that you know that that's true because of what the chart says. And so something that happens as you move up this chart, you notice that there's a break off kind of to the left, or moving up, and that's mosses. And the reason that's there is that tells you that this statement is not true for mosses. It says specialized tissues for moving nutrients. And so mosses do not have specialized tissue for moving nutrients, therefore they split off to the side there. And as you continue up, you see that, so everything from here at the end of that line has a life cycle that involves spores and gametes and has specialized tissues for moving nutrients. This one, ferns cut off to the left because they do not have seeds. If you keep going up, you have conifers, and conifers have seeds, specialized tissue for moving nutrients, and a life cycle with spores. But they do not have flowers, and so they scoot off to the left. And then you have flowering plants. So each one of these, using all four of these descriptions, these characteristics, all four of these, you can characterize these plants at the top four different ways. You could say, let's say ferns. So ferns, they have a life cycle that involves spores and gametes, because this is the line for it. They have a life cycle that involves spores and gametes, and they have specialized tissue for moving nutrients. They do not have seeds, and they do not have flowers. And you can tell that by looking at the cladogram. And so this can be more complicated. There can be a lot of organisms on here. You can even have up here, you can have another split. You can have another split that comes off, and let's try it right here. Another split that comes off and has another plant there, and you'd have a description, either right there or right there. You'd have a description of how that organism is different than the one it splits off of. So what this does is this shows relationships. So a flowering plant, if you were to go back, kind of like a family tree, if you think about a family tree, the longer it takes you to connect branches on a family tree, the more distant that person is. In the same way here, so we have flowering plants. If you were to follow them back, let's look at ferns. So ferns, if you were to follow ferns back, you've got this line right here. Well, if we were to look at another, let's look at flowering plants, their line is going to do this. And so where those two lines meet, which is right here, that means there's a evolutionary biologists believe that there's an ancestor that they share. Ferns and flowering plants came from a similar organism. So that's where their relationship connects. And so a flowering plant is going to be closely related to a fern, but which one, using this cladogram, which one do you think it's going to be more closely related to? Is it going to be more closely related to the conifer or to the moss? The flowering plants. Is the flowering plants going to be more closely related to the conifers or the mosses? So we can figure that out by doing our lines. There's flowering plants. Here's conifers. And we'll do another one for mosses. If you'll notice, flowering plants and conifers, they overlap sooner on this cladogram, so they are more closely related. They have a lot more similarities. So you can use a cladogram to do that, or if you understood how to read the cladogram, if you made a list of these characteristics, you would find that they share 3 of the 4 characteristics. Flowering plants and conifers share 3 of the 4 characteristics. They both have seeds, they both have specialized tissue, and they both have a life cycle with spores. Or spores are gametes. And the only thing that they don't have in common is the flowers. And so that's very different than flowering plants and, I can't remember what we said, mosses, because the only thing that they share is this, because a moss does not have any of that. So I hope that helps understand cladograms. After that, you should be able to answer these questions. I think blank or more closely related. So are plants and conifers more closely related, or are conifers and mosses more closely related? And go ahead and type in your answer here. I think that these two are more closely related, whichever two you think, because, and then explain why. And then another question you can ask yourself to make sure you understand this is, how are ferns and conifers different from each other? So how are ferns and conifers different from each other?